The problem I have is this, Dagda. Normally, because I know so many people don't watch the LPL or only watch the final, normally I want to tell them it's the best region by telling them, like, you don't have to worry who wins, essentially. Like, as long as like, the top four teams get to the right, that double elim part of the playoffs, like, it's actually the most sturdy playoff format in the world. So whoever wins LPL, yeah, maybe they are the best team in the world. The problem I have with this particular split, though, dude, is this. Like, I feel about RNG like I felt about Jankos in the LEC playoffs. He wasn't, like, doing outrageous pop-offs where it's like he's got to be the best jungler. It's like he just played it like an 8 out of 10 every game, and then if anyone else played like a 4 out of 10, they just lost the game and he just caught the throw every time. I felt like that about RNG because, mate, these two top esports series don't even make sense. Like, the first one, top's supposed to easily win and they lose, and then the second one, they look like they're winning and then they lose again. Like, what the fuck? Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it for me. So, like, give me your thoughts on this. Like, RNG has the represent of the LPL. Like, what are the strengths? What are they good at? Like put it this way, am I right in thinking you wouldn't, like, say they're better than T1 right now?
Yeah, no. Like, I think that T1 is the best by far, but I also think people kind of idolize T1 a bit more than they should. I think T1 definitely have their own mistakes. I still think they by far and away beat RNG. I think RNG struggle massively in the early game, and I think a lot of that kind of Monte already alluded to his way. Because when you look at like how Wei was as a player, when he first came into the league in 2020 with E-Star, they looked really good because he had like one identity, which was level 2, level 3, level 4. I'm ganking bot. We're going to dive it over and over and over and over. We're going to get this nice lead. And that got them the whole way into playoffs. Like they finished 6th at that stage for a new team that came in. It was kind of insane.
But yeah,
got playoffs, right? And then you look at summer 2020. And he just has no breeze what he's supposed to be doing, and he looks pretty terrible. And then he gets picked up by RNG. He's got this super set identity of, I'm going to play around Xiaohu, I'm going to gank top over and over and over and over and over. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to get Ming to help me with that. And he looks great again. Then we come into what is now RNG, and again, he kind of doesn't have that like one definitive thing that he needs to do. And I think he's really struggling as a result. I don't think he really knows how to play off of wave states. I don't think he really knows what to do if he doesn't have Ming essentially chaperoning him around the map. I think that's kind of why RNG are struggling in the early stages, because a large portion of the early game was, hey, Wei and Ming are going to link up together and they're going to go top or they're going to go play around mid. And now you kind of look at them and they're like, oh, well, Ming actually had like our highest duo proximity out of any of the top 4 teams in LPL finals. And Ming has been so good at roaming, but now he's just playing around Gala. So Wade doesn't really have that guy to chaperone him or move around the map. And I think he's really struggling because of it. So a lot of the time, Xiaohu now is kind of like having to babysit him through the early stages. So the teams aren't jumping in on top of him. And then it means that they're playing a little bit more heavily around Gala and Ming in the bot side. But it's kind of slowing down the pace of the early game because they're oftentimes relying on Gala getting those late game fights to kind of take over, which is why they're like mid to late game is still pretty good, right? Like once they get a lead and they get into team fights, they know how to execute, but the early game, they just don't really have that identity coming from Wei anymore. And I think he's struggling because of it.
Yeah,
so I'll tell you, go on, Monte.
I think there are some other issues that could be exploited at MSI too. I think part of Top's defeat in the finals was a pretty inconsistent and it seemed like Wayward had nerves. And so that allowed, I think, Bin to do quite well in many of these games, especially in the early games where he was playing versus the Aurelia, but he was doing very well into what is typically considered a counter matchup for the Gnar. And Wayward was playing too aggressively, and he was dying in a way that I think that you play that matchup with a different top laner, and you probably get a very different results. And so I think that might be problematic for them in the future. Is like they kind of got a free pass in the top lane in some of these games, and not sure that's gonna happen to the same degree at an international level.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, realistically, I think a team that actually knows how to play around the early game will just beat RNG. And I think that's the problem, is that top esports, when they got to the mid game, didn't actually know what they were supposed to do when they got there. Like, I think even if you look at, like, I think it was game 2, where they had the Aurelia and the Galio. And they had the ability to play around the sideline if they wanted to, and they just never went for it. Even you look at like whenever they have the Rise, right? You never really see Knight in the sideline. It's all about going to fights and like not actually trying to use pressure that they have on sides to gain numbers advantage or anything. So I think it made it very easy for RNG. Like even if you look at like the Corki composition that Xiaohu brought out, like that was just, hey, we're just going to hands off the wheel. Like, we're just going to play for late game. We don't care about what happens at the early stages. And game 1, game 2, they were able to keep it really slow, and they got to the late game point where they could fight. But if you are against a better team like, say, T1, for example, who were able to take early advantages and then actually
No, well
use
done.
them in a mid game. I just don't see where RNG are able to come into it. You know?
I mean, I think it's if you guys want a good example of this, the finals are less bad, I would say, from Top Esports. But if you watch the semifinal match, because we got 2 best of 5s between these 2 teams, like Top Esports lost 3-1, but they should have won all 4 of the games that were played if you look at it kind of objectively. But there were a lot, and they lost it in very different ways each and every time. Like, it was not playing side lanes properly. Well, Knight is on the rise in one of the games. It was like Baron flipping for a steal in one of the games. Then it was like, we're gonna dive in their base because we're worried about a late game outscale in the last game, and then we're gonna just int it Elder Dragon after that, right? So there were basically Top found very inventive ways to lose, but it was like a different way to lose every single game. And I don't think that's a reliable strategy for RNG. Like, it's just putting yourself in these scenarios is such an uphill battle. Even I will say it's less of an uphill battle than it used to be because of things like objective bounties and because of the strength of scaling in League of Legends in general right now. Like, I would say it's more viable to play this way, the way RNG plays. But still not ideal. Not ideal.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is I just want to see more through their mid jungle, right? Like, you end up seeing Xiaohu going for things like the Rise, where you can actually point and click CC, set up for Weon if he's playing the Lee Sin or he's playing the Jarvan, or
why
whatever.
would you play Corky Lee Sin into Galio Viego? It's like you intentionally are taking the Lee Sin very early in the draft, and you just have no 2v2 power. Like, you just have to seed everything. It doesn't. The synergy level is not amazing.
No, but even when they have things that you can play around, right? Like, if you're looking at what was it? They had the Vex Lee Sin. They've had like the even before this they played like the Rise Lee Sin as well in semifinals and stuff, and you'd never actually see them like play towards it. So it was just super strange. But also, I think Wei's champion pool is a bit of an issue. Like, he doesn't look good in the Volibear. And the only 2 champions that you kind of look at him like, his Viego looks good. His Lee Sin is okay. And then you're kind of scratching your head going, well, what else does he actually have, right? So I think that's why we ended up seeing in both times that these 2 teams played, like, the Lee Sin started to like creep up higher and higher in priority once the Viego was banned. So I think it was just a case of like, Wei didn't really feel like he could play anything else.
Also, the thing that I find cool, though, is like, I actually just appreciate seeing fucking Xiaohu win another LPL title, because the sad thing is people went so hard on the narrative. Because if people don't know, yes, before Xiaohu, the early RNG teams, well, it was technically Royal Club back then, they were all just like Uzi Eye, 1v9, raise the puppy hat. We all know the memes. But like, people pushed that too far with the RNG that had Xiaohu. If people don't know, this motherfucker used to be like an MVP of the league while he was playing with Uzi Eye. And even though, yes, at the time that they had like the best team in the world, certainly they created to Uzi Eye, he was still one of the absolute best players. I think if you actually even look the year before that, Season 7 Worlds, you'll see like he was absolutely one of the best players in the world, like could have won Worlds a couple of times. So I always find it cool when people can like step out of the shadow of the narrative. And I even think he's made a totally unique perspective, because even though he comes from a region, you'd think LPL and LCK should be like, it's like the Chovies of the night. It's like the high mechanics, like the best player. No, the cool thing about him is he has like the perks vibe to him. Like, the motherfucker can just lose lane but win the game. He just know. In fact, he's even had the fucking successful role swap and keep winning, which if you don't get it, just shows that you just know the game. That means you don't even have to play your role to know the game and how to close situations, win, do things where like essentially know what matchups work without a lead and stuff. Like, this guy's just a fucking winner. So for me, him and Ming, like, I just love seeing people like that stack championships. Like, probably mad underrated players in history because they come from the LPL, sadly, but some of the best to ever do it. So it's in the same way as Mako got his Worlds, I think it's cool to see these guys keep stacking championships without Uzi Eye, so not all the credit just doesn't go to one player.
Also, I think, like, if you want to see the potential of these players, go ahead and watch Game 5 of the finals. And sure, we will have a debate about whether Zoe Zig's all magic damage was a great idea in the Game 5 of a series. I would say no. I would say no. But also, credit where it's due, like, Xiaohu was a fucking wizard just sniping Jackie Love out of the back line with the Vex, and Ming's hooks were extraordinary in that game. And so both of them played out of their minds. And people will point at Jackie Love and be like, why didn't you flash it? I don't know if it was reasonable to expect him to flash when he's like, when you're seeing Vex skill shots threaded between like 5 people and he's getting hit from an entire screen away. Like, it was ridiculous what Xiaohu was doing. And this is why we see the priority on Vex in China and in Korea to a lesser degree, but especially in China, is that if you play this champion well, at 2 items, you can just 100-0 people. Like, if you could just get back there and fuck people up.
And I think it was really interesting this series as well, because we had like the 2 best Vex players in the league. Like, if you look at like every highlight performance that we've had from like any Vex, I think 3 of them are like Xiaohu and 1 of them is nice. It's just been absolutely insane, like what he's able to do. And this isn't the first time, like even from games where they're behind, where he'll just blow up 3 people as Vex and absolutely turn the course of the game. Like, it's insane what he's able to do. And I think it's going back to kind of what Thorin was saying, like, not only have we had the role swap from Xiaohu, it also felt like, honestly, Xiaohu had to basically take on the jungle role to a certain extent in the series that we saw as well. Like, the fact that he has to play against Knight, one of the best laners that we have in the LPL, and he's also got to worry about what way he's doing, then try and get roams off, trying to set everything up. And what you'll see him a lot as well, where like, say Wei wants to move up the top side to make a gank for Bin. Well, oftentimes Xiaohu will like shove Wave and actually go and like cover bot side as well. So he's trying to like cover everything on the map at the same time. And I think it just speaks volumes to him that like, not only is it a case of like, oh yeah, well, you got the role swap. It's like, this man is so like omnipresent on the map and it's such a good understanding of like, what are the potential plays that can turn the game around, but he's there to protect it at all points in time.
So he's also entered the faker tier where you play mid lane and just secretly jungle at the same time and just moonlight in another job at your current job. All right,
but this is where we've seen the meta kind of going, and we talked a lot about T1 playing these kind of long range pick comps or these that contain a lot of resets, and T1 was doing it with the Kai'Sa in the mid lane, right, and trying to get a lot of damage. They were doing it with Vex as well, and Jace. But basically, the theory holds true among these top regions right now, which is that you really, really want to have extremely long-range poker engage, and then you're following it up with some kind of reset, whether it's like a Viego or an Aurelia. These kind of champions are extreme. Jinx. These kind of champions are very strong in this meta because they allow you to snowball fights so easily and to capitalize off of the poke that you get. I think even it's true in top esports. If you look at their last game, I mean, you can see the theory of it if the Zoe and Ziggs combination, because they were nearly one-shotting the Vex. And I think if Xiaohu had been slightly less fed, maybe they can hit the like bubble into Ziggs bomb combo that they were looking for just to zero somebody out. But they did fall behind, and so that wasn't really an option. So I think there is a little bit of bias when people are going to be looking at that draft. But also, going in even at a deficit made it too easy to build, Force of Nature and Merc Treads, and then like, how do you kill anybody?
There's a key segue I've got here, because this is a question I now want to ask Dagda about the aforementioned top esports. So, by the way, Dagda, if anyone follows top esports, it's totally fitting they would lose a game 5 of a final. They've already done it in the past as well, just like this, because one of the things I hate about top esports, mate, here's what I love. They have the player Knight, maybe the best player never to win Worlds. He's up in that category. If people don't know, genuinely, he is like Sleeper being the best player in the world for like 3 straight years. He just, unfortunately, had that one World that was mildly lackluster, but that even ties into what I'm going to talk about. Anyone who's a fan of Knight must hate their coach like I do, because this coach, it's like you would think it was the other team coach purposely fucking up the draft. Dude, bear in mind, he's been the one mainstay in this team, this amazing mid laner. Dude, if you even read the interviews, it's like the players themselves, I don't know if they're just memeing, but it's like they seem to know these drafts are always just fucking scoffed as hell. Like, haven't you noticed that? He has a really cursed fucking drafting history in his teams, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you're kind of referring to the 2 Galio picks at the start, where I was just like,
oh, many of that are just weird.
Galio? Yeah, and look,
like the amount of times, for example, he'll be in a game where it's like if you give him the carry champ, and then like you say, he'll play some supportive champ, or they'll draft a comp where it'll be like no fucking damage or something like that. There's so many weird ones they do, and they've had like, if people don't know, they've had like super skilled lineups for years and years now. They could draft a lot of other things.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking at this series, like, they seemed fucking terrified of Galio, and I have no idea why. Like, they were blind picking it on red side, like, every single rotation. They banned it every game as well. I was like, there are answers to this. Like, you're totally fine to let this through.
The rest of the world, dude. It's not even played elsewhere. Like,
and it just they had like Xiaohu had that one good Galio engage with like the Hecarim. I think it was like game 5 of their last series or game 4 of their last series, where they completely wiped them. They turned it around, and like that was like their game-winning play. And it just seemed like PTSD from that, where they're like, we can't let this through. Like, this is just so busted. And I don't know, like Knight, you could see it in like game 3 and 4 where you actually had him on a champion where he could do something, and looked like a completely different game. And
look, I don't disagree with the philosophy of the Galio pick, and here's why. They were getting the Irelia counter pick into the Gnar as a result of like the early picking of the Galio, right? And the concept here is that he's supposed to go and help the side lanes, which he is objectively, him and Rookie are very good at, showing up under your tower at level 4 on a Galio and then doing it again once Galio gets ult. Like, it's a great champion to go ahead and snowball those lanes. You have the long range engage, which is a premium right now for catching people out. The problem is that when your Irelia isn't strong, you're useless, right? Yeah. You don't do shit. So if anything, I think that they came in with a game plan of punishing a Gnar pick. And then when they realized that Wayward was not in a state to be carrying these games, then they switched it up. And all of a sudden Wayward was playing, a tank or something like that instead. And they were having a little bit more higher damage from a Rise pick in the mid lane or what have you, right?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest problem with that for me is like when you see like the Lee Sin, you pretty much instantly know that you're going to lose the mid jungle, right? Like, because you're going to go with the Viego, Lee Sin is the priority there, and you're going to get counterpicked because they rotated it first, right? Like, even if they'd taken it on like red side third pick, I would have been like, okay, cool, now you can ban away some picks and make sure it's all right. But you just gave all the time in the world for RNG to figure out how they wanted to draft against it. And you've already got a strong jungler there to pair with it. So I just never really saw an opportunity where Knight was going to be able to roam, like play off towards sides in those early levels. And then you kind of get to a point where, okay, cool, like you can try and play for team fights, right? And I agree with the Irelia. I think as well with the set, you had some opportunities to do that. But even then, when they got to team fights, the coordination on the fights was all over the place. I think Mark had a terrible series. Like, him on the set looked atrocious. He was whiffing all over the place when it came to this Leona. So it just felt like they never really got to a position where they could actually either use the Galio in the early stages or had the coordination to try and use it in the later game fights as well. So the whole plan just kind of looked abysmal from the get-go. And I just don't know what they're thinking. I just don't understand why they kind of go, oh yeah, like we're going to blind Galio when we have so many things that are just going to push us in and not give us the opportunity to make any plays.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.